The collapse of Evergrande has shaken the pillars of the Chinese economy and put the world on alert. One of China's largest construction companies, racking up colossal debt, now faces imminent bankruptcy. The Evergrande crisis is a financial earthquake that raises a crucial question. Are we witnessing the end of the Chinese economic miracle? The warning signs were there, but Evergrande's sudden and drastic fall took many by surprise. Investors are panicking, global markets are in turmoil, and millions of Chinese citizens are facing an uncertain future. How did such a powerful company get to this point? What are the implications for the real estate industry and the global economy? The Evergrande crisis is not just a story of debts and bankruptcies. It's a reflection of an economic system that may be on the verge of collapse. How will China respond to this crisis? Will other real estate giants follow suit? And what does this mean for the world economy? The answers to these questions could change the economic trajectory of the 21st century. 1. The collapse of a giant. The fall of Evergrande and its implications. Evergrande, once a symbol of China's economic rise, is now facing a precipitous slump. The company, which began as a small construction company in 1996, quickly expanded, driven by massive borrowing and unbridled ambition. However, the combination of financial mismanagement and an overheated real estate market eventually revealed the fragility of his empire, culminating in an astronomical debt that exceeds $300 billion. The impact of Evergrande's collapse is vast and multifaceted. Lenders are panicking, investors are facing substantial losses, and millions of Chinese homeowners are now in limbo, with unfinished projects and unfulfilled promises. Confidence in the housing sector is in free fall, which could have devastating repercussions for the economy that has relied on the housing boom as an engine of growth for decades. Evergrande's bankruptcy also raises questions about regulatory oversight and economic policy in China. The government's inability to predict or control the situation reflects critical gaps in the country's economic management. This not only undermines foreign investors' confidence in the Chinese economy, but also exposes vulnerabilities that can be exploited by international competitors, altering the global economic balance. 2. Domino effect. The impact of Evergrande's bankruptcy on the global economy. Evergrande's crisis is not limited to China's borders. Its effects reverberate globally. Financial markets around the world have been rocked, with significant declines in stock markets as investors seek to reallocate their assets in search of safety. The uncertainty generated by Evergrande's bankruptcy is triggering a wave of sell-offs in risk assets, raising volatility in the global market. Countries with close economic ties to China are particularly vulnerable. Economies dependent on commodity exports, such as Brazil and Australia, are seeing their markets suffer as Chinese demand for raw materials slows. In addition, international companies that have invested heavily in the Chinese real estate market are now facing massive losses, which could result in a global economic downturn. Evergrande's collapse is also putting pressure on central banks and policymakers around the world to reassess their economic strategies. With the possibility of a financial crisis spreading, there is a growing urgency to create risk mitigation policies and bolster economic stability. This crisis serves as a wake-up call to the interconnectedness of global economies and the need for constant vigilance over large financial conglomerates. 3. China's economic miracle. An illusion dispelled? Evergrande's bankruptcy forces a critical reappraisal of the so-called Chinese economic miracle. For decades, China has been seen as an example of rapid and sustainable growth, driven by an aggressive development model and unprecedented urban sprawl. However, the current crisis exposes the dangers of an economy fueled by debt and runaway real estate speculation. Many experts argue that China's growth model, centered on construction and urbanization, is coming to an end. Over-reliance on real estate has created economic bubbles that are now beginning to burst. Evergrande's bankruptcy may be just the beginning of a series of collapses of companies that have expanded too fast and racked up unsustainable debt. Moreover, the crisis calls into question the effectiveness of government policies that have fostered this unbridled growth. The Chinese government's interventionist approach, often seen as a strength, may not be enough to deal with the magnitude of the current crisis. This situation may force a significant restructuring of the Chinese economy and require a new development paradigm to avoid future disasters. 4. The real estate crisis and the dream of homeownership in Evergrande's bankruptcy is a severe blow to millions of Chinese citizens who aspire to own a home. For years, buying real estate was seen as a sure path to prosperity and a way to ensure financial stability. However, with the current crisis, many buyers find themselves in a nightmare, with real estate projects stalled and not expected to be completed. The stories of families who have invested their savings in Evergrande properties are heartbreaking and dramatic. Many now face the prospect of losing everything, with no compensation in sight. This desperation is generating a feeling of widespread distrust in the real estate market and could lead to a drop in demand, further exacerbating the crisis in the sector. In addition to the economic impacts, the crisis is affecting China's social fabric. Housing insecurity and financial uncertainty are causing significant tensions among citizens, leading to widespread protests and discontent. The government faces a monumental challenge to restore confidence and ensure that such crises are not repeated, while trying to balance economic stability with the well-being of the population. 5. Politics and economics. The Chinese government's role in the Evergrande crisis. The Chinese government's response to the Evergrande crisis is crucial for understanding the current and future dynamics of the country's economy. Initially, the government took a cautious stance, hesitating to intervene directly, which sparked speculation about the extent of its involvement. This hesitation, however, contributed to panic in the market, aggravating the situation. Subsequently, stricter regulatory measures were put in place to control credit expansion and prevent other companies from following the same disastrous path as Evergrande. These actions, while necessary, came too late for many investors and homebuyers, who were already deeply affected. The effectiveness of these measures is being closely watched, as Evergrande's bankruptcy could be indicative of deeper structural problems in the Chinese economy. In addition, the crisis raises questions about transparency and corporate governance in China. The government now faces the task of reforming the financial and real estate sector to prevent future crises, which could include a reassessment of credit policies and a strengthening of regulatory oversight. These reforms are essential not only to restore confidence in the domestic market, but also to maintaining China's credibility as a global economic power. 6. Shell companies. Other real estate giants on the verge of collapse. Evergrande's bankruptcy could be just the tip of the iceberg, signaling broader problems in the Chinese property sector. Other industry giants, which followed a similar growth model based on high debt and rapid expansion, now face similar risks. Companies such as Country Garden and Sonic China Holdings are under scrutiny, with their financial positions being thoroughly assessed. The interdependence between these companies and the Chinese financial system is a growing concern. With billions of dollars in debt, the inability of these companies to meet their obligations could trigger a broader credit crunch, affecting banks, investors, and the economy as a whole. The fragility of the real estate sector exposes vulnerabilities that could result in a cascade of bankruptcies, adding to the panic in the market. The Chinese government is in a race against time to implement measures that can stabilize the sector and avoid a total collapse. This can include direct interventions, debt restructurings, and financial support for at-risk businesses. However, the effectiveness of these measures depends on swift and decisive implementation, which will require careful coordination between regulatory authorities and financial institutions. 7. Panic investors. What should investors do now? For investors, Evergrande's bankruptcy represents a time of great uncertainty and risk. With market volatility at an all-time high, many are reevaluating their investment strategies to protect their assets. Diversification is a common approach, with investors seeking safe havens in more stable sectors and geographies less affected by the crisis. The crisis also highlights the importance of rigorous risk analysis when investing in emerging markets. Evergrande's situation serves as a reminder that high returns come with high risks, especially in sectors such as real estate, which are subject to boom and bust cycles. Savvy investors are advising caution and a more conservative approach until the situation in China stabilizes. Additionally, there is a growing search for alternative assets that can offer some protection against market volatility. Gold, Cryptocurrencies and investments in sectors such as technology and healthcare are being considered as possible alternatives. However, the key to navigating this crisis is agility and the ability to quickly adapt investment strategies to new market realities. 8. A new era for the Chinese economy. What to expect in the future? Evergrande's bankruptcy could be a turning point for the Chinese economy, marking the beginning of a new era of restructuring and reform. The over-reliance on the real estate sector needs to be reassessed, and a more sustainable growth model must be implemented. This could include an increased focus on technological innovation, sustainable development, and expanding the domestic market. The transition to a new economic model will not be easy and will require significant reforms in government policies and business practices. The Chinese government will have to balance control over the economy with the need to encourage entrepreneurship and innovation. The response to this crisis may determine China's ability to maintain its position as one of the leading global economies. Finally, the social impact of this crisis cannot be underestimated. Public confidence in the government's ability to manage the economy is shaken, and social stability could be at risk if the crisis is not addressed effectively. Building a more resilient economic future will require not only economic reforms, but also a concerted effort to rebuild public trust and ensure that the needs of the population are met. Evergrande's bankruptcy is just the beginning of a series of events that could redefine the global economy. The shockwaves of this crisis are still spreading, with possible repercussions going far beyond China's borders. What's next for the global real estate and financial market? What will be the Chinese government's next moves in the face of this monumental collapse? Each new revelation about Evergrande's situation and its implications brings more questions than answers. The world is watching closely, looking for signs of recovery or further worsening. How will other economies adjust to this new scenario? And more importantly, how will confidence in the Chinese economic miracle be restored, if at all? Evergrande's story is far from over. What we see in the coming weeks and months may well determine the economic future of a generation. What will be the consequences? Follow closely, because this is a chapter of economic history that no one can afford to ignore.